What is going on, everybody? Back again today, and as you can tell by the title, we're going to discuss a topic that has been discussed a lot. Some would argue that I'm beating a dead horse here, but I think I can put a somewhat unique spin on it to kind of make it worth talking about. And that the debate, as you can tell from the title, is DC versus Marvel. Now, this is a discussion that most people would think it's not worth having at this point. Both companies have been around for decades upon decades. They're both contain characters that are cultural icons. Both have had their good eras and their bad eras. They have their A-list rosters, their B-list rosters. It's like apples to oranges, some people say, even though I don't necessarily agree with that expression, but still, you guys get the idea. But the specific way in which I've been thinking about this over the past like week or so is basically this. For the past couple years, my comic book reading, if I have been reading any Marvel or DC, I've been reading like past stuff. Like I've been playing catch up. I stopped being current with Marvel back during the Fear Itself crossover event, so that's how long ago that was. And then with DC, I stopped being current after Dark Knight's Metal. I thought the ending of Dark Knight's Metal was just way too over the top and way too cringy and corny, and I just didn't like it. I didn't like the direction they were taking it in. I did not like the fact that like they seemed to be veering away from Jeff Johns' original idea for Rebirth, and they were going into more like the Scott Snyder show, and I didn't like it. So that was when I stopped being current with DC, really. But after 2 years of just reading past stuff from like the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s, I have decided I kind of want to give one of them a shot again. Dark Knight's Death Metal wrapped up 2 years ago now, and they actually have just finished their first big event, which is Dark Crisis. They just my review of that is on the channel as well. Did not really like that either, but I always felt that like I will be able to go back to DC once, this Scott Snyder era ends, and then like they get another chapter in, and that next chapter was like Infinite Frontier and Dark Crisis, and now that's even over. So I feel like there's enough distance between death metal and now to where like it really shouldn't be an issue anymore. It's done. It's in the past. But I have been sampling some DC stuff. My favorite character is Batman. Call me basic, but that's what it is. So I've been diving back into Batman. I read Robin. I'm currently on Batman versus Robin, building up to like this new event they've got kind of coming up going on called the Lazarus Planet. And I don't know what it is, but it just doesn't feel like comics are being written anymore with the same level of like seriousness that they were in the early 2000s. Like if you read Marvel and DC stuff from like the year 2000 to like 2010, it was some like it was some good. It was like they took it seriously. They wrote seriously in the same way that it's like I'll use this comparison. Uh, the Lord of the Rings the Lord of the Rings is a trilogy, and then you got the Warcraft movie. Both of them are fantasy films set in fantasy worlds that have humans and orcs and dragons and shit like that. But you can tell when you watch any of the three Lord of the Rings movies and the Warcraft movie, you can tell one of these was made, and the creators making this film were like, we're going to take, even though this is a fantasy film about fantastical nonsense, we're going to take this shit seriously, and we're gonna make it just as serious as anyone would make any other film. Like we're gonna take this shit seriously. And then you can tell with the other one that they were just kind of like, this is some fluff fantasy franchise shit that we're hoping to just make a bunch of money off of. Just slap some shit together. Who really cares? It's fantasy. It's fucking bullshit fantasy. Who really cares? And you know which one I'm talking. The Lord of the Rings is the one where they took the shit seriously, and Warcraft is the one where they were just kind of like, just throw some fucking fantasy shit together with some CGI and let's move along. That's kind of what I feel. I feel like back in the 2000s, they were taking comics were taken seriously, and the writers that they had working at these companies were like, even though I'm writing about like superhero fake shit, I'm still going to take it seriously and try to write a good story. In the current day and age, I feel like writers are just writing like, let's just write some over the top, bombastic, cringy, borderline anime style shit. Like I read that Batman versus Robin, or not Batman versus Robin. I'm reading Batman versus Robin currently. I read the Robin story where he goes to the island and he takes part in the fucking tournament. That was very anime. You know, oh, a bunch of teenagers participating in a tournament where they fight each other. Wow, wonder where they got that idea from. And it was just kind of like the concepts are simple. They're very simple and just kind of like it doesn't really seem like it took a lot of effort to think it up. Like, oh, Ra's al Ghul. Ra's al Ghul is all it means the demon's head. He calls himself the demon's head, and he uses the Lazarus pits to be immortal. So what if it was like an actual demon in the Lazarus? Like it's just like this the most not bullshit, but the most simple correlation. His name has the word demon in it, and these pits have powers, demon powers from the pit. It's just, ugh, it's just so simple. The best word I can come up with is simple. It's simple shit, and it's not as entertaining as I think comics used to be. But I'm kind of going on and on and on here. Uh, I really I want to get back into one of them. You know, I've had 2 years of reading the past stuff from like the 80s, 90s, 2000s. I wanted to try and sample modern stuff. Like I said, like I'm dabbling in the modern Batman and Robin stuff, but it's just kind of eh. And I've been trying to do my research and see if Marvel's any better. And the unique set of parameters that I decided to put around this discussion are it's not just Marvel versus DC, it's Marvel versus DC the past 6 to 7 years. And what I mean by that is since DC initiated their Rebirth stuff, and since Marvel did their Secret Wars event back in like 2015, 2016, because those were like the big time, those were the big last big things that I feel like Secret on the Marvel side it was Secret Wars, and on the DC side it was Rebirth. Those two initiatives and events, things, whatever, those are what ushered in the current era of Marvel and DC comics that we're in. And so that's the area that I'm trying to judge and evaluate here. And I started this by putting some posts on Reddit asking people exactly like what they thought about that, like the past, not in general Marvel versus DC, but in the past 6 to 7 years since Secret Wars and Rebirth, which company, which franchise, which comic book line, and we are talking about comics here. We're not talking about movies or animation or video games. We're just talking about comics. Which comic book company do you think since 2015, 2016 has given us better comics? better and I'm really focusing on story here more than artwork. Like I can be pretty critical of artwork sometimes, but to me artwork is artwork. I think I judge it more by the story. So I'm kind of like which line, Marvel or DC, the past 6 to 7 years has given us the bigger overall story? Who's got the bigger story? You know, is it Marvel or is it DC? And I'm not looking for an opinion on any one character, any one series, any one crossover event. I'm looking for the entire picture here. Marvel the past 6 to 7 years and DC the past 6 to 7 years. That was, and I put a few posts up on Reddit. I did not get a lot of replies. I don't know if people are just tired of having this discussion or what. I think I got a total of 6 replies. Uh, Out of those 6 replies, let's see, one guy, he said they were even. He's like, the past 6 to 7 years, they've both been about neck and neck even. All right. And then so that was one guy. And then there were, I think, like 4 others. And I want to say 3 of them voted for DC, and 2 of them, I don't know if I have my math right here. Basically, what I'm saying is it was about 5 or 6 people commented on one of the posts, and DC came out ahead by like one person's opinion. Uh, and for that guy that said they were both tied, I just gave a point to both DC and Marvel. So it really didn't answer my question. You know, DC came out on top, but it was by one, and only 5 people weighed in. So I decided to get a little more mathematical about it, and I went online to I looked up every single like crossover slash major event that had happened in Marvel and DC since for Marvel, I did it since Secret Wars. I started with Secret Wars, and for DC, I started with Rebirth. And I looked at every single major crossover and major story event in the entirety of DC Comics, the entirety of Marvel Comics, and I went onto the website Goodreads. I don't know if anyone, a lot of people have probably looked on Goodreads before, but uh, you can rate books and comics on Goodreads. You can assign it a score one to five, 1 to 5 stars, and you can leave a review. So I looked at the ratings on Goodreads for each of these comic book stories, and like I said, I wasn't looking at like um, James Tinian's run on Batman. I wasn't looking at Donny Cates' run on Venom. I was looking at major because I want an opinion of the overall story that has been going on for the past 6 to 7 years. So for that we have to look at like major events and crossover events. So that's what I did. And I got the scores for all of those from Goodreads. So here's the Marvel scores. From Secret Wars, goes down here, and they're all here. And Marvel ends up with a score of 3.46 average. Like I averaged all these together. And by the way, each one of these scores I checked on Goodreads, and they had a number of ratings. They didn't all have a lot of written reviews, but they had a lot of ratings, like in the hundreds, as in hundreds of people had gone on Goodreads and given their ratings as to like, out of, 1 to 5. And so I felt like it's a pretty good statistical analysis. If we want to get really kind of like scientific and statistical about it, I feel like this is a pretty good analysis of the overall quality. Marvel is sitting at a 3.46 out of 5. Okay, that's Marvel. DC is sitting at slightly higher with a 3.49. That's their average score. Now, to me, if you look at that 3.49 and 3.46, that is a very minute difference. So it kind of at first had me going, okay, so clearly that guy on Reddit who said like they're about even, they're about neck and neck, that guy is correct. But then I noticed something. You see these things, these green checks that I put next to these. These are major crossover events, story events in the past 6 to 7 years that are Batman related or Batman involved in Batman Central. And it's about 40%. It is 40%. It's 8 out of the 20. So to me, what that tells me is that if DC didn't have Batman, their score would probably be 40% lower. I think I have my math right on that. I don't know. Regardless, at the end of the day, you can determine that are they neck and neck in terms of score, overall score? If you look at it this way, doing this kind of statistical analysis using these scores from Goodreads, and we're judging the overall story that is comprised of major events and crossover events, it looks like they're neck and neck, but you notice that DC is heavily propped up on Batman. Now, I love Batman. Batman is my favorite fictional character of all time, but that's, you know, as someone who's looking for a superhero comic book universe, that's not Batman. Batman is one character. So, yeah, I feel like it comes down to this. If you're okay with the idea that like, hey, DC does not have much of a universe, it does not have much of a pantheon, people are going to disagree with me. They're going to be like, oh, it has Wonder Woman and Green Lantern and Flash and blah blah blah. Sure it does, but it's like this, okay? I thought about it the other day. I was like trying to decide. I was like, okay, which characters? Let's go over some of the A-list characters, even B-list characters from both companies. And it's like, okay, would you like to read a monthly series of Batman comics? Yes, I did. I told myself, yes, I would. Would you like to read a monthly series of Superman comics? I said, yes, I would. Would you like to read a monthly series of Wonder Woman? Not really. What about Flash? Not really. Green Lantern? No, not particularly. Justice League? Okay, yeah, I'd read a Justice League book. I'd read it. What about Suicide Squad? I don't know. It depends what characters are in it. Not really though. No. Teen Titans or Titans? Yeah, I'd probably read Titans maybe. Teen Titans or Titans. Okay. What about Green Arrow? No, not really. Martian Manhunter? No. Shazam? Not really. And this is just me. I'm asking myself if I would like to read monthly series about these characters. So we're Aquaman? No, not particularly, no. And I really came down to just those four. I would read a Batman monthly series, a Superman monthly series, a Justice League, and a Titans. And then I asked myself about the Marvel. I was like, okay, would you like to read a Spider-Man monthly series? Yes. Would you like to read an Avengers monthly series? Yes. Guardians of the Galaxy? Yes. Daredevil? Yes. Ghost Rider? Yes. The Sentry? Yes. Who else was there? There were more. Iron Man? Yes. Who else? There was a lot more. Venom? Yes. Uh, I'm already at double, you know? So it determined that's where I came to the idea of like, and then now between that little conversation that I had with myself and then looking at this, I'm like, yeah, um, Marvel has more of a multi-layered, multifaceted universe. DC is like Batman with some extra supporting characters who also get their own little side stories sometimes. So that's really what it comes down to, I think, is it's like in the conversation between DC versus Marvel, and we're talking about the past 6 to 7 years, the conversation becomes this. Do you want a comic book universe, fictional comic book universe that is multi-layered and multifaceted with a lot of varying different settings and dynamic characters who are unique and different from one another, and none of them are really shown favoritism in comparison to others? Because if that's what you want, you should go with Marvel. If you want a superhero comic book universe that is heavily dominated by this one character who is very compelling, interesting, and popular, but it's going to be heavily dominated by that one character, and everyone else is going to mostly be a supporting character, well, that's really going to, then the DC's more your thing, and that's really if you really like Batman. So, yeah, and let's look here back at the Marvel stats again, just real quick. For Marvel, as you can see, it is a plethora. It's a variety. Secret Wars is everyone. Civil War 2 is everyone. Inhumans and X-Men focuses on the Inhumans and the X-Men. Secret Empire was Captain America heavy. War of the Realms, that's cosmic space. Black Vortex, more. It's just so varied. It's so varied. When Marvel does crossover events, they really are crossover events. They encompass multiple layers and facets of the Marvel universe. You have some in here that are specific. I said Secret Empire was kind of Captain America, Hydra related. Obviously, King in Black is very symbiote Venom related. Devil's Reign is Daredevil, but like Judgment Day is it's the Avengers are involved, the Eternals are involved, the X-Men are involved. Like it's a lot of different shit. Death of Doctor Strange is obviously going to be focused on Doctor Strange, but it just seems like they spread the love out a little bit better in Marvel than they do with DC. Which as far as the superhero universe goes, I think I like that better. And seeing as how collectively their average score was 3.46 and DC's was only 3.49, and that's with 40% of it being Batman. And that's what people have been saying. I think, looking back at some YouTube videos I've watched of some other people's channel where they talk about the comic book industry and the comic book world, that's a common thing that I've heard the past 6 to 7 years. It's just that it's just all Batman. It's all Batman. It's Batman heavy, Batman dominated. It's not even DC well, I guess it is DC. DC originally, it's Detective Comics. That's what it is. So, yeah. So yeah, based on this, what I've found so far, I think I'm gonna dive back into Marvel Comics and try to start getting current again with Marvel Comics. And I'm just gonna I thought I was ready to come back to DC after Death Metal. I thought I'd given it enough time, but it does not look like yeah, time has gone by and it looks like they are away from Death Metal, but they did not go in a very entertaining direction. I really don't think we're going to see a turnaround for DC until they get their film franchise righted, because that's where all the money and the attention is these days. It's on big budget, that high budget, high profit live action franchise type stuff. And Marvel already has that in spades. I get it's, phase 4 is whatever, but let's be real, it's the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's not going anywhere. It's going to be fine. Every single movie they make makes buckets of money, and I really do think we will see a rise again. I think this phase 4 was like, I've said this before on the channel, after the Infinity Saga and Thanos, they had to plan. And while they were planning, they had to fill the void with something. And I think that's where a lot of the mediocre crap we've been getting comes into play. They're just like, we need content. We can't have a lull in content output. So just put some shit out there. At the worst case scenario, it introduces a new character, that we can play with later on. Best case scenario, people really love the show or the movie or whatever. Worst case scenario, it just gets the new character introduced and we can play with them later on in future projects. But just put out content. And I think the plan for this multiverse saga is actually on an upswing. I saw Ant-Man and Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania this past a week ago today, and it was entertaining. I liked it. I was entertained by it. I thought it was pretty good. So, not mind-blowingly good, not the best, but it's another chapter. It actually had something to do with the multiverse. We actually saw Kang, like not He Who Remains, like real Kang for the first time. And yeah, I liked it. So I think that's on an upswing. And when you have a successful live action franchise like that, the success trickles down into the comics. Like people over at Marvel and people over at Disney Marvel, they're not unaware of the success of the films, and that kind of stuff does trickle down. Like, hey, this idea, this concept, this story idea, plot element that we introduced in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, people really liked it and it turned out well. So try to find a way to like work that into the comics. It's not it's not a coincidence that right around the time the Civil War movie was coming out, Marvel Comics decided to do Civil War 2. It's not a coincidence that ever since, couple years ago when the Eternals live action movie came out, Marvel has been doing more. They've done a new Eternals comic book series, and the newest event, uh, Judgment Day, heavily involves the Eternals. It's not a coincidence. So I think based on what I'm seeing here and all the research I've done, time itself is not going to be enough to fix DC. I think they will. It's not going to be until their live action franchise gets fixed that we will see their comics get fixed. Because if they can get their live action franchise on track in a way that makes people happy, then the comics will start being mandated to be more like the live action stuff. And then, if it worked, if the story worked in movies and film, it'll work in comics. It just will. We know it will. So yeah, but the final piece of my research as to, which is better the last 6 or 7 years, Marvel or DC, is this video. Like I said, I'm relatively sure of my choice to kind of get back into Marvel, but I'm not 100% sold on it, and I'm really gonna want to see what people say about this video, about, is DC as Batman heavy as all signs indicate? Is Marvel as uh, diverse and equal spreading with the love amongst all of its characters and settings as research leads me to believe? Is my description of when I talk about the biggest difference between the two, Marvel being this universe with a lot of different characters that get equal love, and DC just being all, mostly Batman, is that an accurate description? Um, you know. So yeah, leave some comments below. Let me know. I kind of want to know. And I feel like this is a more unique discussion than just DC versus Marvel. I specifically want to know, like in the past 6 to 7 years, which has been better, which has given us, which company has consistently given us the better comics. And once again, I want to judge it as the overall overarching story, not any one character's particular series, not any artist or writer's particular run on a book, the overall arcing story, which has been better. So consistently better. Like if DC's had like some really high points and then some really low points and then some really high points and then some really low points, to me that sucks. Whereas if Marvel's been over here where it's kind of like, little, a little more gradual with the waves, then I would take that. I would rather have a steady line of halfway decent, okay stories than have to go great story, shit story, great story, shit story. So yeah, let me know. Leave some comments down below, get a discussion started. Let me know you guys' thoughts and opinions. If you like this video, please hit the like button. That really helps out my channel. And if you want to help out my channel even more, check out some of my other videos and subscribe. Other than that, I'll talk to you guys later.